Hello and welcome to week 4 of Lit 4121, Mythology of Heroes and Villains. This time we're talking a lot about what does hero actually mean, especially in contrast with the ideas of villains. Whenever you have a story about a hero, there's going to be a villain of some kind. And it is often cast in light as a reflection of or a contrast to the hero. But before we get to that, real fast, want to go over real quickly what the reading is going to be. Obviously, the reading from the text, from villains and monsters, that sort of thing. One thing to be aware of is these often perform roles as well as the heroes do. Villains and monsters and evil masterminds, they set up a situation for to challenge the hero, but they're also set up to provide a different moral and ethical argument. And quite often that is, whereas the hero tries to protect things, the villain tries to, as it shows here in the book, simplify the world, cast in a single image, where they themselves, the villain, is the one that makes the decisions the most important. This is why you want characters to have very simplistic points of view, and this is where a lot of the good guy wearing the white hats and villains wearing the black hats idea comes from. Is even though villains may say they have complex morality, they understand the world the way a hero doesn't, they are aware of subtleties that heroes can't be. In reality, if you look at most villains and most villain motivations, what they want is very simple. They want the world to listen to them and follow their commands, and no one else coming up with counter points of view or point out that there are a whole bunch of different ways of doing things that are not just the villain's point of view. And one things we see about this is I go on a little bit about this in my written overview is about the Netflix show The Punisher, which is very much in the sometimes called anti-hero or sometimes the villain that has to do something heroic role. We see these kinds of people who take actions that are morally questionable, who that try to simplify the world into you have done wrong and I'm going to punish you, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to get revenge on you. These are moral and ethical choices that often set somebody in a role of I'm going to reduce everything down to you are my enemy and I'm going to destroy you, when the world can often be quite complex. And that's why we get all these ideas about how heroes and villains can be. One thing I want to mention, and I touched on this already a little bit, is villains are often cast as reflections, dark reflections of heroes. So, for example, these are comic book characters. On the left is Daredevil in the red, and Kingpin or Wilson Fisk on the right. And maybe you've watched the Netflix show, maybe you've just heard about it. These are two characters, both who can passionately love the area that they live in, that they want to fight for, that they want to guide it, protect it, whatever. But their ideas of this are very contrary. Daredevil wants to just keep people from abusing others or hurting others in there. Kingpin wants to be in charge of it, wants everybody to listen to what he has to say. They're both can fight. Kingpin tends to be more of an intellectual person, while Daredevil tends to leap in and punch things. But they both can fight. They can both, and as you can see, physically, they're cast as reflections. Daredevil, while muscular, slender, is shorter, is more dramatic. Kingpin looks more like a regular person, but he's big, he's bulky, he's threatening. These kinds of uh, ways of contrasting each other is specifically to have this moral argument. What can you do? Things are messy and tough, and sometimes the villain can look more ethical than the hero because the villain doesn't get his hands dirty. There's all kinds of that sort of debate that's being writ large, sometimes with colorful costumes and socks to the jaw. This, of course, is a still from the movie you watched the first week, All Star Superman, which shows one of the classic of the past 20th century hero and villain combinations: Lex Luthor on the left, Superman on the right. And again, you see now this is a similar framing as the Kingpin Daredevil, but this time Superman is clearly bigger, more physically intimidating. Lex Luthor is known for his intellect. You'll often find, by the way, that many of these contrasts are the hero is physically powerful and the villain is intellectually powerful. And there's a whole bunch of prejudices, biases set up in there, which is we as a people tend to trust people who can take physical action, do something we can see as being good, whereas people who are quiet and thoughtful and their motivations may be unclear and they plot and they plan are people we are trained to distrust. But more than that, it's again the contrast. Even though there's nothing that says Superman is unintelligent, Lex Luthor is defined by his intelligence. And so that is the contrast there, is they are set in opposition to each other that way. So one of the classic examples of these kinds of things comes from literally the oldest heroic story we have any record of, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is difficult to read, the Epic of Gilgamesh is, but it's well worth doing. The previous link I had in here, like many links, unfortunately, went dead, but I have a new link. It's not quite as visibly appealing, but it does give you an idea of a translation of the text of Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, remember, this is one of the oldest texts we have. It dates back more than 4,000, almost 5,000 years. And in it, they tell these stories about this character, Gilgamesh, who is powerful, who is strong, who has all of this might on his side, and yet doesn't necessarily use it morally and ethically. As a matter of fact, he, to his people, may be seen as a villain. But of course, Enkidu is not, who is also has similar characteristics, is also powerful and strong, and while not necessarily moral, has the simple innocence of being like a wild animal, not necessarily knowing that there's a thing such as civilization to which he may judge his character, his actions. The interesting contrast here is that they're very similar characters, they're very similar people, but when all is said and done, Enkidu and Gilgamesh are set in opposition, and then the opposition they realize, which is a very complex and interesting story choice, that they kind of complete each other, and by being with each other, being partners and working together and active, they each fill a missing part in the other. They're two sides of a whole that they can use to do great things and learn from them. This is one of the oldest heroic stories in any known civilization, and it can be difficult to read. Obviously, it was written by people who have different standards of what a story is and how stories should be told. But it is well worth trying to make the effort through at least a few of the tablets. Obviously, there are a lot of them, and they are not always easy reading. But I urge you to try to look through one or two of these tablets and see if you can understand some of the text here. Because one, it is some of the oldest writing we know of, and therefore it's worth looking at for that reason. And two, to see if anything in here seems familiar, because this is the story that from which many other stories have sprang. The powerful king, the powerful hero who can do anything, being forced to understand, to learn how to be more than they were. Speaking of heroes who may be morally and ethically questionable, the Netflix video, and again, while I didn't state it clearly here, if you're having trouble getting it through Netflix, there are all sorts of other ways to look at and get your hands on a copy of Jessica Jones Season 1, Episode 1. This is a character that was created in the comics, and in the comics was meant to be the kind of noir detective living in a superhero world with the ability to keep up with superheroes if she needed to do superhero things herself, but with completely different sensibilities, cynical, distrustful of superheroes for various good reasons. In the comics, of course, everything is more vivid and more lurid. Jessica Jones lives in a world full of superheroes who she has encountered or knows something about. And for a while there, in the image here on the right, you'll see that she tried to actually be a superhero briefly. Whereas in the show, the story is different. But even so, it is the similar kind of thing. She's a person who is if you asked her if she had a morality or an ethical sense, she would have trouble giving you an honest answer. Of course, because if you watch the show, you'll see she does, but like many noir detectives, which was one of the things that makes that genre so appealing, is that their ethics are maybe clear, but they're not necessarily what we would call good all the time. She's more than willing to take pictures of people committing crimes and sneaking up on people and being doing things that we often would consider immoral. And yet, she tries to not be a bad person, even though she has done bad things. And so, while she is not necessarily a villain, she is very much in a moral and ethical quandary through most of the season, and she makes decisions which some people could easily say could make her look to be a villain in some lights, because she's trying to do what she thinks is the right thing, the best thing for everybody. And Jessica Jones is a show well worth watching. It is harrowing if you choose to watch the entire show. The first episode gives you kind of a sense of that, but there are some very rough episodes in terms of what she has gone through and what she survived. I recommend it, but I also recommend it with a caveat that it can be hard to get through emotionally, especially if you've had anything that seems like a similar experience, even in a smaller way. It can be rough to get through, but it is a very important show, and if you can make it through, I think it is well worth understanding what's being said here besides just the superhero story. So, those are the readings and my take on them. I hope you get some good ideas. The discussions have been excellent so far in the discussion boards. I'm looking forward to seeing what these will look like as well. Also, don't forget that the next assignment will be another analytical response. Now, you've already done one of these. I'm sorry that the grades haven't gotten back to you. Again, I had a backlog this week, but I will be catching up this as soon as possible. So you should be able to see these analytic responses grades very quickly in the next few days, so that you will know how to change your approach if you need to for analytical response too. And a similar type of paper, you may choose any of the new videos or the most recent crash course videos, or anything from the supplementary readings that we've done, like Jessica Jones, or you can talk about anything like from Enkidu or Gilgamesh, or any of that sort of thing, or whatever else you wish. And again, talk about narrative structure if you wish. You don't have to keep just a hero's journey. I want to keep emphasizing this. The hero's journey is very useful, but it is not the only way to analyze these kinds of stories. Um, Ways that myths play roles in modern society. How do superheroes compare to mythological cultures? By the way, you're welcome to expand that question. Do you see mythological culture heroes in other kinds of genres as well? Or when you've chosen a text, so you say if you've chosen Jessica Jones, who do you think is more compelling, the hero or the implied villain, and why do you think that is? That sort of thing. And again, MLA citation style, you're going to need a couple sources, and I would recommend you can use either people writing articles about the shows themselves. Scholar.google.com is a great place to look for that kind of thing, or see if you can see some interesting reviews, especially some of the shows. I mean, Enkidu and Gilgamesh have had thousands of papers written about them. Jessica Jones has had several articles analyzing what's going on there. So you should be able to find some good sources for this. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. The Ask Isaac forum is useful, but I only get a chance to see it every couple of days, so email is more likely to see me right away. I will talk to you all later. Bye.